The carriage rattled over the jagged stones of the imperial road, each jolt a reminder of the journey that Aria had not chosen. She sat quietly, her hands folded over the folds of her dress, feeling the eyes of the guards on her. Their gazes were heavy with expectation, or perhaps pity. Rumors had reached even the farthest reaches of the empire. The emperor was sending his daughter, Aria, to the human mechanic, and the empire's courtiers whispered it was to mock the man. Aria's reflection in the polished wood of the carriage door was a cruel joke in itself. Her face, round but intelligent, betrayed nothing of the turmoil inside. She had grown up in the shadow of her father's disdain, known to the palace as the fat daughter, the unwanted child who was beautiful in every other way but for her roundness. Every banquet, every council, every public appearance had been another opportunity for the emperor's jokes, thinly veiled insults masked as humor. But Aria had learned early that survival required patience and silence. Yet, for all the humiliation, she had never been truly powerless. She knew the value of observation, of understanding things others overlooked. Every mechanical contraption in the palace workshops, every hidden chamber, every whirring device in the emperor's collection of toys and machines. She had studied them in secret, dreaming of the day her skills might matter. The carriage jolted again, and Aria's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden stop. Outside, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and stoic, dressed in plain clothing that contrasted sharply with the gilded uniforms of the imperial guards. He carried tools in a leather satchel, and the faint clinking suggested he was a man who worked with his hands more than his tongue. The guards muttered among themselves as the man approached the carriage. "This is him?" one asked, his voice betraying doubt. "The human mechanic?" "Yes," another replied. "He's unusual. The stories don't do him justice. They say he fixes things no one else can touch, and he doesn't bow to anyone." Aria's stomach tightened. She had heard tales of this mechanic, Andrew. In a world where status was everything, Andrew was an enigma. Not noble, not courtly, not concerned with the emperor's politics. A man whose skill surpassed kings and generals, yet who lived far from the palace, among machines and smoke and metal. And now, she was to be sent to him as a joke, a token of her father's cruelty. The carriage door opened, and Aria stepped out, feeling the chill of the early morning air bite at her skin. She straightened her back. The guards gave her a look that said, "Don't embarrass yourself," but she ignored them. Every eye in the small clearing turned to her, expecting ridicule or weakness. Instead, she lifted her chin, masking the fear and resentment with practiced poise. Andrew's eyes, dark and unreadable, examined her silently. He said nothing, merely gesturing for her to follow him. His workshop was a sprawling maze of gears, pistons and half-finished machines, lit by the flickering glow of molten metal and the sharp gleam of polished steel. The air smelled of oil, metal, and smoke, a scent that would have repelled most people, but Aria found herself oddly fascinated. "You are the emperor's daughter?" Andrew asked at last, his voice calm, almost bored. It was a statement, not a question. "Yes," Aria replied, careful not to let the tremor in her voice show. "He sent me to assist you, I suppose." Andrew tilted his head slightly, as if considering the words. "Assist me?" He glanced at her form, the slight curve of her body that had drawn laughter from others, and then back at the gears surrounding them. Interesting. Aria's heart skipped a beat. Was that mockery or curiosity? She couldn't tell. But there was something in his gaze that made her sense she might not be underestimated here. Not in the same way she was at the palace. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could prove something, not for the emperor, not for the guards, but for herself. Andrew moved to a massive machine in the corner of the workshop, one that hissed and groaned as if alive. It was unlike anything Aria had ever seen. A fusion of metal and engineering she couldn't immediately understand. Sparks danced along exposed wires, and valves hissed steam in rhythmic pulses. He gestured for her to approach. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. I've seen devices like this in the imperial workshops," she replied cautiously. They are energy regulators?" Andrew's eyes narrowed slightly, and he allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Not bad. But this is far more complex. Only someone who can think beyond the obvious could understand it." Aria swallowed hard, her mind racing. This was her chance. She moved closer, studying the machine, noting the patterns of gears and the flow of energy through the conduits. Her hands itched to touch, to test, to learn. You want me to operate it? She asked, her voice steady now, filled with curiosity instead of fear. Andrew shook his head. No, not yet. I want to see if you can understand it first. Most people who come here, no matter how skilled, cannot. A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. She had spent her life being underestimated, mocked, laughed at. But here, in this dimly lit workshop, no one's judgment mattered except her own. Hours passed. Aria examined, sketched, and theorized. Andrew watched silently, intervening only to correct a minor error or redirect her attention to something she had overlooked. Slowly, she began to understand the rhythm of the machine, the hidden logic behind its chaotic appearance. She began to see solutions where there were problems, paths where others saw only dead ends. By the time the sky outside had turned a deep shade of purple, the machine's hum had changed. It was smoother, more stable, as though it had recognized a guiding hand. Andrew finally spoke. Interesting, he murmured. You are exactly what I needed. Aria froze. Exactly what he needed. She had expected mockery, dismissal, maybe even disbelief, but not this. Not acknowledgement. Her mind raced. Does he know? Could he see what the Emperor never did? And then, from the corner of the workshop, a shadow moved. Something, or someone was watching them. A faint hiss, barely audible over the machine's whirring, made Aria's pulse quicken. She glanced at Andrew, who noticed instantly and moved with surprising speed, stepping protectively in front of her. Do you hear that? He asked quietly. Aria nodded, gripping the edge of the table for support. What is it? Andrew didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his satchel and pulled out a small, intricate device, flicking a switch. A soft hum filled the air, a barrier of sorts, and the shadow recoiled. Aria's eyes widened. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew one thing. Whatever danger was coming, it had just arrived. And somehow, she felt certain she would have to face it, with Andrew, and with her own unexpected strength. For the first time in her life, being the Emperor's fat daughter didn't feel like a curse. It felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. The night settled over the workshop like a thick velvet curtain, the glow of molten metal casting long shadows across the walls. Aria could still feel the faint pulse of energy from the massive machine at the center of the room, humming as if it had a life of its own. Every movement of its gears, every hiss of steam, seemed to echo the rhythm of her own racing heart. She had expected a dull, tiresome day, mockery, boredom, endless polite insults from the Emperor's servants. Instead, she had discovered a world that challenged her mind and rewarded her curiosity. Andrew moved around her silently, adjusting valves, tightening bolts, and calibrating dials with a precision that left her both awed and intimidated. The small, intricate device he had activated earlier still hung from his belt, a silent guardian against whatever shadow had lurked near the workshop. You've been watching it too closely, Andrew said quietly, not looking at her. A machine like this, it tests patience and precision. One wrong move, and you could. Aria interrupted, her voice firm but respectful. I understand, but I've spent years observing things others dismiss. I've watched patterns, studied devices, learned the hidden rules. I can follow the machine's rhythm. Andrew finally looked at her, his dark eyes assessing. You surprise me. Most people who arrive here wouldn't even know which lever to pull first. You think differently. That is rare. Aria's lips curved into a small, proud smile. For the first time, she wasn't just the Emperor's joke. She was useful, important, capable. And Andrew wasn't dismissing her because of her appearance or her past. He was evaluating her skill, her mind. Before she could respond, a sharp, metallic clanging echoed from the far end of the workshop. Both of them froze. The sound was deliberate, too rhythmic to be accidental. Aria's pulse quickened. Andrew's hand went to his satchel again, flicking a switch on the device that cast a faint barrier around the machine. We're not alone, he murmured. Aria's eyes widened. Someone's trying to sabotage it? Andrew didn't answer immediately. Instead, He gestured for her to follow him behind a large, reinforced workbench. Together, they crouched hidden in the shadows. Through the dim light, Aria could see a figure moving, quick, agile, and masked. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing. Every step was calculated, every movement careful. And yet, there was an arrogance in the intruder's actions, as if they believed they were untouchable. Andrew's hand brushed hers, a small, grounding gesture, and Aria felt a surge of courage. "What do we do?" she whispered. He shook his head. "We wait. Observe. You need to understand the machine and its vulnerabilities. If you panic now, you'll make a mistake." Aria nodded, forcing herself to breathe slowly, to study the figure. She began noticing subtle patterns. The way the intruder avoided certain spots, the slight pause before interacting with specific panels, the rhythm of their movements. It was like reading a language she had never been taught, but instinctively understood. Suddenly, sparks flew as the intruder touched the wrong lever. The machine groaned, steam hissing violently. Aria's heart leapt, and without thinking, she leapt from behind the bench, rushing forward. "No," she shouted. Andrew moved to intercept her, but Aria's hands were already on the control panel. With a series of precise adjustments, she stabilized the mechanism, redirecting the flow of energy with an instinct that surprised even her. The machine's hum softened, its pulse steady once more. The intruder froze, realizing they had been noticed. And then, as if anticipating Andrew's next move, they bolted toward the exit, disappearing into the night. Andrew's eyes widened slightly, not in anger but in genuine surprise. "You handled that better than I expected," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. Aria's chest heaved with exertion, her face flushed. "I couldn't just watch it get damaged. I know what it needs." Andrew studied her for a long moment, and then, to her astonishment, he smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Exactly. That is why you are here. The Emperor may have sent you as a joke, but you are what this machine needed. Not physically, not because of appearances, but because of your mind. Your instincts." Aria felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of validation she had never known before. For the first time, she wasn't fighting for approval or survival. She was fighting alongside someone who recognized her worth. Over the next few days, their partnership deepened. Aria worked tirelessly, analyzing every component of the machine, sketching diagrams, proposing adjustments, and testing theories. Andrew taught her techniques, showed her tricks of the trade, and gradually, the workshop became a place of mutual respect rather than tension. During late-night sessions, when the hum of the machine was the only sound, Aria began to glimpse the man behind the stoic exterior. Andrew had scars on his hands and arms, faint reminders of past experiments gone wrong. His eyes, usually so unreadable, softened when he spoke of the machine's history, of the failures he had endured, the innovations he had pursued. "You think this is just metal and energy," he said one night, as Aria adjusted a delicate gear. "But it's more. It's a reflection of the mind that controls it. You see patterns others miss, and that is why you survived here, why you thrived where others would have failed." Aria glanced at him, surprised by the intimacy of his words. I've always had to observe to survive," she admitted quietly. "People dismissed me, underestimated me. My father called me a joke." Andrew's gaze met hers, steady and unflinching. "Then it seems the joke is on him. He sent someone who could make the impossible happen. Someone who could see the machine not as a tool, but as a partner. That's you, Aria. That's exactly you." A quiet pride swelled within her, but it was accompanied by unease. If the Emperor had sent her as a joke, who else might be watching? Who might try to undo what they were building together? The thought lingered unspoken, as sparks flew and steam hissed, the machine alive under their hands. Later that night, as Aria and Andrew left the workshop, the air outside was crisp, filled with the scent of metal and rain. She felt a shift within herself, a mixture of excitement, fear, and determination. She was no longer merely the Emperor's fat daughter. Here, she was something else entirely, a force to be reckoned with. And Andrew, he was no longer just a distant, enigmatic figure. He was a partner, a teacher, someone who saw her not as a mistake or a joke, but as vital to something far greater. Yet the shadows had not disappeared. The figure from the previous night had not been caught. Someone was out there, waiting, watching, planning. And Aria knew that whatever trials awaited them next, she would face them not as a pawn, not as a joke, but as herself, ready, capable, and far stronger than anyone, even the Emperor, had imagined. The night deepened around them, full of unknown threats and hidden possibilities. And within the workshop, the machine hummed on, a living testament to their growing connection, and the extraordinary future that awaited them both. The workshop had never been quieter. The machine sat at the center, silent now, its energy stored and waiting, humming softly like a beast lulling before the strike. Aria had barely slept, her mind racing with calculations, contingencies, and possibilities. Andrew moved around her with the calm precision of a man who trusted the machine. And now trusted her. But outside, the world had begun to shift. A low wind rattled the windows, carrying more than the chill of night. It carried intent. The intruder from days before was back, bolder this time, bringing with them tools, weapons, and malice. Whoever they weren't just after the machine. They were after Andrew, and now by extension Aria. "You're ready for this," Andrew said, standing behind her as she tightened the final gear of the central mechanism. "But remember, don't rely on me. Rely on yourself. I can't predict what's coming." Aria nodded, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from the electric thrill of anticipation. She had come a long way since the carriage ride that had brought her here. She had transformed from the Emperor's fat joke into someone capable of controlling a machine no one else could understand. And now, she would have to prove that transformation in action. The intruder struck just as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon. Windows shattered, and a dark figure dropped silently into the workshop, moving with lethal intent. Aria reacted instantly, pushing a control lever to redirect the energy flow in the machine. Sparks flew, smoke hissed, and the intruder staggered backward, taken aback by the sudden surge of power. Andrew lunged forward, tools in hand, but Aria stopped him. "No," she shouted. "Let me do this. I can handle it." He hesitated, then nodded, recognizing the determination in her eyes. "Then do it, Aria. Show me what you've learned." Time slowed in her mind. Every gear, every wire, every valve of the machine was a part of her now. She moved with precision, her hands flying over the controls, diverting energy, creating shields, stabilizing pressure points. The machine responded to her touch, humming in resonance with her thoughts. The intruder lunged again, this time with a sharp blade aimed at Andrew. Aria's heart skipped, and without hesitation, she activated a sequence on the machine, releasing a controlled burst of energy. The shockwave knocked the intruder off balance, sending them crashing into a wall. Andrew recovered quickly, but it was Aria who advanced, her confidence now absolute. She had become the force the Emperor never thought she could be. Every insult, every cruel joke, every dismissive glance had been transformed into the sharp clarity of her mind and the precision of her actions. The intruder scrambled, realizing the human mechanic wasn't alone in his genius. Aria's movements were not just instinct, they were strategy. Every adjustment she made was a step ahead of the attacker, predicting their next move before they could make it. Finally, with a final flick of her wrist and a calculated adjustment to the machine's energy output, the intruder was incapacitated, knocked unconscious by the controlled surge. Silence settled over the workshop again, but this time, it was a silence of victory. Aria exhaled, her body trembling from the adrenaline, and looked at Andrew. His eyes held something she had never seen before, a mixture of awe, respect, and something softer, warmer. "You did it," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. "You controlled it. You mastered it. I underestimated you before." Aria shook her head, a small, triumphant smile forming. "No," she said softly. "You didn't underestimate me. I hadn't trusted myself yet. Now I do." For the first time, she felt free, not just from her father's judgment, but from every expectation that had ever tried to define her. She had proven her worth not by title or appearance, but by intelligence, courage, and skill. Andrew placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "You're not the Emperor's joke. You're exactly what the world needs. And frankly, so am I. The following days brought news from the Empire. The Emperor had learned of the events at the workshop. Not from Aria, but from the messengers who had arrived too late to prevent the confrontation. Reports spoke of a miraculous defense. A daughter who had tamed the most dangerous machine the kingdom had ever known, and who had saved a man revered for his genius. The Emperor's first reaction was disbelief. How could the daughter he had mocked so cruelly accomplish such a feat? How could she, who had been labeled a joke, succeed where the most skilled courtiers had failed? When Aria returned briefly to the palace, escorted not by pity but by respect, the Emperor could barely look at her. She had changed. Her posture, her presence, the sharpness of her mind, all spoke of someone beyond his comprehension. Aria, he began faltering. I did not expect. She held up a hand. You expected a joke, she said, her voice calm, almost serene. But I am not here to amuse you. I am here to make sure the Empire does not underestimate what it can achieve, through skill, courage, and thought. And perhaps one day, you will understand that. The Emperor swallowed hard, the weight of realization pressing down on him. The daughter he had mocked, the fat girl he had sent as a joke, had done what he never could. She had mastered the impossible, protected the invaluable, and emerged as something far greater than a mere reflection of his whims. Back at the workshop, Aria and Andrew worked side by side, their partnership now a force to be reckoned with. She had grown not just into the daughter the Emperor needed to recognize, but into the woman she had always been capable of becoming. You know, Andrew said one evening, as they watched the machine pulse under the dim glow of lanterns, I think we make a good team. Aria smiled, the weight of every insult, every judgment, and every sneer falling away. We do, she agreed. And I think the Empire, and the world, will learn not to underestimate the ones it mocks. Outside, the wind whispered through the workshop windows, carrying the faint echoes of past doubts and future possibilities. The shadows that had once threatened them were gone, but Aria knew that life would always bring challenges. Yet for the first time, she was ready. She was no longer a joke, no longer a pawn, no longer the Emperor's fat daughter. She was Aria, the daughter who had tamed the machine, faced danger, and proven her worth. And beside her, Andrew was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that together, there was nothing they could not overcome. The machine hummed, alive and responsive, a reflection of their minds, their courage, and the unbreakable bond they had forged in the fires of challenge. Outside the workshop, the world awaited, full of danger and opportunity alike. But inside, Aria had found her place, her power, and her purpose. And for the first time in her life, she was free.